Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to our Problem and Incident Management Virtual Summit here today. My name is Julie Moore, and I'm going to be speaking to you about categorization. What are we going to do within incident and problem management to put some method behind the madness of the data that we collect within those two processes? What exactly is categorization? Categorization is a way for us to begin tracking the activities that happen in incident and problem management. It's helpful to show us how quickly we need to respond because we can attach service level timers to help us prioritize the work that we gather. We can actually use it to begin categorizing the types of incidents and problems that we're going to see within those two processes. And that's extremely valuable for us to get a picture of the total customer experience, the things that are going on, the issues that they may be experiencing with the services, either from an incident or a problem management perspective. Categorization also helps us to divide up that total quantity of incidents or problems into classes or categories. This is extremely valuable to feed back into continuous improvement. If there's a particular class or category of incidents that are continuing to recur, then it's often very helpful for us to begin looking at what could be causing those to recur. It feeds into problem management where we begin looking for the root causes of these issues. And it gives us the ability to track similar incidents that are related to products or services and also compare them to the related problems. This is important for us to come up with an accurate categorization because if we don't, our ability to extract the information from the incident management system or the problem management system is impaired. So the more accurate we are in how we categorize the data, the more meaningful those reports and then the analysis that we can do from those reports that drives continuous improvement. I've come up here with two examples of categorization that for most of you are probably fairly familiar. I'm going to start, though, with the recipe box. If I were to go into any of your homes, I would imagine that everybody's recipe box is, captured very differently. You could do it by food category, like appetizers, beverages, breads, breakfast, that kind of thing. You could do it by ingredient, apples, bananas, beans, beef, berries. You could do it by the ethnic identity, such as Asian, Chinese, European, French, or by special occasion. Now, there are ways, especially if you have people in your house that have restricted diets, you may even do it by some sort of a unique classifications like 6 ingredients or less, or bread machine, casseroles, diabetic. So the variety of possible categorizations from just a small set of data like where we store our recipes is very evident. It's very unique and specific to you as an individual and your eating habits. Now, if I look at something like the Dewey Decimal System, this was meant to be a classification system that applied to all libraries and all books that are stored within libraries. Now, it basically it kind of divided up all of the classifications of knowledge into 10 main high-level classifications. Each one of those classes was then further subdivided into 10 divisions, each division then into 10 sections. So we essentially wound up with 10 main classes, 100 divisions, and 1,000 sections. Now, this allowed us to create a consistent mechanism to kind of look at the way that library books are stored on the shelves within a library. And you as an individual could go into just about any library across the United States and be able to find the subject matter that you were interested in because of this common classification scheme. So when we begin looking at how do we classify incidents and problems, my guess is most of you went with the recipe box type of approach. And you very quickly, your incident management system looks like a recipe box where nothing's really stored where it's supposed to be. You've got just, kind of chaos. Whereas the Dewey Decimal System, we have a lot of controls in place. You go to a library, people check books out, they check them back in. There's only one place that the book can actually go on the shelves based upon that classification scheme. So we're looking at something that can help to create much more consistency in the chaos that we can get, all the different varieties of incidents that we typically have within a support organization. So why is categorization so important? First of all, it enhances not only our ability to create knowledge, but our ability to find knowledge. And that's what's so important when we look at what we capture with incident management. We have solutions that we have solved before. If we can find them and reapply that solution, then we don't have to rediscover or take the time to rediscover that kind of the chain of events that it takes us to come up with a solution for our customer. When we start looking at problem management, the ability to link incidents with problems, with a known error and a workaround, and then possibly to the change that we submit, the value add of that life cycle connection of data is extremely important for the overall view of service management and how we can better provide a consistent approach to what our customers are looking for and how we can improve the services that we're providing. So if we classify incidents very more like the recipe box, you can imagine then if your problem management has got a completely different structure, being able to compare from incidents to problems becomes very difficult and a very manual process. So we want something that's going to link these in a consistent way. It will enable the processes to run much more efficiently. It will actually be able to create a more consistent flow, which I think is really important. Another thing that it does is it connects to our escalation points. When I look at, connecting a particular category type item, and I can't solve that, but I know that that particular category type item is going directly to a particular escalation group. Think about how it eliminates the errors within the escalation. So we can put within the category structure the ability to escalate to just one group. That's going to create a lot of efficiency. But we have to have clarity in that category type item structure in order to create consistency in the escalations. Reporting and trend analysis is going to be so much easier with a valid categorization structure. It's going to improve problem management. If we don't have service level targets in place today, we'll have a better understanding of the levels of service that we can provide. We can base the targets from that. And if we have SLAs and we're not really meeting the expectations of the business, we'll be able to better investigate and identify those continuous improvement opportunities that will help us to better deliver to meet the business expectations. Now, when we think about this, categorization is very much, we're thinking it from a reactive perspective. The customer calls, I'm documenting what's going on, I pick my category type item structure, and I'm storing that knowledge now within my structure of my incident management system. But if I want to go and look for things that weren't identified, that I didn't get out of event management, I didn't get from my customers calling, I have to be able to systematically go in and look at that data and be able to look at it in a meaningful way to identify these errors or problems in the environment that we didn't see from all of the other tools and investigative techniques that we're using. Really, proactive problem management hinges on this category type item structure being as accurate as it possibly can. So overall, a good quality categorization scheme really improves the overall quality and the delivery of the services because the information that we get from that will be much more meaningful in the delivery of those and continuous improvement of those services. Now, I commonly refer to what we capture within incident management as being the golden nugget of information for IT. If we do one thing well, let it be that we capture information in incident management in a meaningful way that it can be used to drive continuous improvement. If we capture every single interaction with our customers, then we're more empowered to make a difference long term than we are if that information is collected in an ad hoc way or in an unmeaningful way. So this is truly where we can begin to identify failures in that experience, ways in which we can improve. We can better investigate complaints and really get to the root cause of what is causing poor service within the environment. Without it, we're really making a lot of decisions across the service life cycle that are based upon, hunches or we think something is going on. To be able to support it with real factual evidence, this is the golden nugget. This is where we can drive real good decision-making within the operational environment. Now, that leads itself to, well, why is this so challenging? And if you go back to the recipe example, I mean, our good intention is always to start off with a recipe box that's got everything in order. But over a period of time, as you're using the information in there, it very quickly gets to be mayhem, where you're not putting stuff in the right places. The structure grows, it fragments over a period of time. A lot of times when we begin creating this categorization scheme, we do it with the perspective of IT, and yet the information that we're trying to capture out of this is relevant to driving service improvement or better value to the business. So we kind of have these different perspectives clashing for the way that we're capturing that data. Another challenge is just purely based on the politics of the organization. It's kind of deemed like if your product or service isn't in the categorization structure, then somehow your product or service isn't as relevant as someone else's. So we begin to add things for the sake of adding them. Another thing is that we're not putting these things under change control. So it's not a group of individuals making the decision on how to modify this structure. It's just we make the changes in a very ad hoc nature. And so it just becomes very convoluted. There's multiple ways in which one incident can be categorized, and then we begin to lose the trend analysis that we're looking for. Another thing that really lends itself to this categorization becoming unruly is the complexity of our infrastructure. If we did a better job at managing that, our categorization structure is usually meant to reflect the different types of products and services that we're providing in the environment. So the more complex the infrastructure, the more complex that structure will grow over a period of time. But I think even given all of those other things that are listed up here, if we had clear policy in place and clear standards in place, we could go a long way to driving consistency in the way that we are capturing information within the incident and problem management processes. So what does work in categorization? Typically, if you try to keep your hierarchical menus to 3 or 4, you've got the basis for a good categorization. Now, when we say hierarchical menus, what we mean is that when you pick your first category, your first high-level object, then you're going to get a restricted view of the second-level pull-down menu that you're going to choose. And then once you pick one from the second menu, you get a restricted list in your third menu. What we don't want to have happen is when you saw that, like, for example, the Dewey Decimal System, is for you to have all options available at all times. Once you pick your high-level class, you should get a subset of your next categories. And that's what we really want to drive. That helps to drive consistency in the way, and most of the major tools do that now. So having the hierarchical menus is very much built into the kind of the fabric of the way that the tools work. You can kind of think of these in terms of like a family, a parent, a child, and an issue relationship-wise. Maybe we do it as service, category type, item, action that we're doing. In some organizations, it makes more sense to start with type, then start with service, component, or symptom. Or even if you're in a very dislocated or decentralized environment, you might want to start with location as a way to begin tracking from a high level the issues that are being experienced in a particular geographical region. So again, the choice in the first menu gives you a subset of choices in the second. So just by picking family, we know that we're going to restrict the parents because, we've only got 2 parents in each family. Now, overall, the hierarchy simplifies the categorization of incidents. if I only have one way to put a ticket into the ticketing system, it's very unlikely that we'll get errors. What we don't want to see is having 4 or 5 different ways to put a particular type of incident into that categorization scheme, and then, of course, we lose the trend analysis. It reduces the errors and duplicates, and it definitely helps to tie each category type item structure to the owner, the location where we might send it if we need more advanced skill sets to help us troubleshoot a particular issue that the customer is facing. Now, here's 2 sample structures. I went with service category type item action, and then the other one, type service component symptom action. And I'm using the same service for both of them. If we start with the one on the left, if we start with service, probably going to be something generic like email, then that falls into a category that we might have for kind of categorizing all of our services, maybe communication and calendaring. The type might be Outlook, the item is connectivity, and the action that they're trying to do is log into the domain. And so you can see how once I pick email, I have a subsection of categories. Once I pick my category, I have a subsection of types. There's only so many email clients that we have in our organization. Now, if we look at it on the other side, on the right-hand side, we're starting with the type of issue that the customer is calling in about. So it might be incident, request, some form of origination. Maybe it's a web submission, or it came in via email, and we want to track the vehicle in which it came into the organization. Then we see here, we say service, which is the same email component. Maybe we're talking about desktop versus laptop. Symptom is connectivity, and then action would be login to the domain. But no matter which structure we choose, notice that we still get very clear kind of collections of data that are going to be meaningful to us when we go to report on that information as part of continuous improvement. Now, if we did it without those hierarchical dependencies, notice that with all the possibilities, we've had 10 choices at the service level, 100 choices at the category, 1,000 at the type, and 10,000 at the item with some written description. I mean, this is the reason why we have such chaos a lot of times in the ticketing systems, is because we don't have this ability to minimize the number of choices that the individual entering the ticket could do. On the other side, look at if we pick one service, that now reduces it down to 10 choices for category. We pick one, we get 10 types. We pick one, we get 10 items, and then we write the description. Notice just simply by hierarchical dependency, we have reduced the potential error, and at least where we're storing the incidents is going to be a lot closer than it could be under all the possibilities of where we might be able to store it. So we definitely get a much cleaner, more error-free than we would if we had not a hierarchical dependency with those pull-down menus. Categorization also drives a lot of things that are going on across the service lifecycle. Now, incident management, there's a clear connection here. We're tracking incidents. We want to do so in a consistent manner because we want to be able to understand the customer experience and identify things that we can improve that will make it better for our customers to use these services as part of their business processes. Within problem management, we're driving trend analysis. How often are things happening within a particular category type item structure? And if it's happening a lot, why is it happening? A lot of the proactive problem management analysis techniques are living off of those category structures. So if it's ineffective, then you're really going to hamper the organization's ability to move to much more of a proactive view of providing those services. And ultimately, what we're doing, either from reactive problem management or the proactive side, is to look for and identify ways to eliminate errors so that we improve the products and services that we provide. So this is a really important value add that we get from the categorization structure within problem management. But if we expand outside of that, when we go into the filtering and correlation that happens in event management, the ability to understand the types of events that we're detecting and how those will map to incidents and problems is very important for the business logic that we have to build into those filtering and correlation engines. So we see a connection here with event management. That's early detection. And not just early detection, but boy, I want to get it to the right person as quickly as I possibly can. If we can drive efficiency within event management, then we'll be able to begin the restoration process that much more quickly. Reporting from all the service management processes is going to be driven by this category type item structure. Whether I'm in availability management and I want to look at a particular service and all the incidents that impacted availability of a service, or if I want to look at a particular component, if I'm doing a component failure impact analysis, I can go in now and look at that information within incident and problem and actually be able to track it back to the component level and be able to use that as part of my availability planning. So many of these other, especially in the design phase where we're looking at security and continuity, capacity and availability, very much driven to drive continuous improvement through what is gathered in the operational environment. Now, if we also look at the individuals that are working and supporting the organization in incident and problem management, where do we make the decision on what skills they need to do their job? If I have clear indication of the services, first of all, that we're providing, but then the type of incidents and problems that are coming in, whether they're hardware-related, software-related, I get a really good view of the level of skills that are necessary at level 1, level 2, throughout the organization. So not only can I do the skills assessment, what do they need to know, but then based upon the types of stuff that need to be solved at the single point of contact or as we escalate, I can even determine the level of knowledge that they need and come up with good training plans to help bridge the gap between where they are today and where they need to be to support the customer. We also can tie it back to service catalog management because ultimately we see these two views of service, the customer-facing view of the services that they use within their business processes, right? And now we can actually see that high-level categorization really matches well to the types of services that we would capture within the service catalog. But then when we look at, well, what about the supporting services and the things that we're using internally within IT to, provide the services that are going out to the customer or enhance them? Now we can look at the incidents and match those up to our customer-facing services and our internally-facing services and really be able to drive improvements based upon those services that are most important and most critical to the business, but also important to supporting that. So we get to make better decisions around where we focus our efforts to really drive value out to the customers because we have meaningful information that's in a customer-focused view. Service level management, if we're going to commit to a level of service to our customer, we need to be able to track the issues that are occurring by service or by customer and then be able to define very clear escalation paths. That creates efficiency so that we're managing the exceptions to the service that we're providing in a very linear and timely fashion. But being able to set the timers at the appropriate handoff points based upon the type of service and the level that we've committed to, really important for us to have our categorizations, divided up appropriately so that we can manage whether it's service-based SLAs or customer-based SLAs effectively. And last up here, from a knowledge management perspective, as I said before, this golden nugget really does represent a lot of the knowledge of what we gain around how well as a service provider we're performing for the customer. We can use that information to improve. It's not just known errors and workarounds. It's identifying where's the most likely place that we might create change models and incident models and problem models and request models. We drive a lot of that knowledge capture from those things that happen most often. Well, if we're not tracking that information in a way that shows us the repetitive nature in the way that we're working with our customers, then we're likely to spend time capturing and using knowledge in areas that don't really make an impact on the call volume or on the service that we're providing. So it really does help to drive much more efficient capturing, spending our time gathering knowledge where it's going to make the greatest improvement to the business. Now here's the picture of the overall value of what we're trying to achieve. So we have this service. It starts with the customer with the desktop machine. We've got the networking supporting service. It's got a server and a database. And we have these different functional groups across the IT organization that provide support for that. So we have the service desk that's working directly with the customer, the desktop that's managing the desktop machine, the server team that's managing the server, the network team that's managing the WAN, and the data warehousing group that's managing the growth of the data that we have within the environment. And so we have all these functional groups focused in on providing the best possible support that they can in their area of expertise. They're going to use what's captured within the incident management system and the problem management system to drive continuous improvement within their domain. And that makes perfect sense. I want to know what's going on in the desktop environment, where are my trends, where are things occurring, where should I focus my efforts to improve. But then when we look at what the processes bring to us, so incident management focused on restoration, problem management doing root cause analysis, change, root cause elimination and management of risk, release, adding new functionality into the environment, availability, improving services, capacity, improving scalability. And then finally up there, security, where we're trying to identify vulnerabilities and risk and put the appropriate controls in place. When you think about that view and how do we make decisions in those processes without capturing information that's meaningful across those functional groups and being able to tie the incidents that are happening at the desktop with those that are happening at the server level and the network and tying it back to a server or a service and then being able to drive continuous improvement to that service. I mean, this is the kind of the what drives the service life cycle to make the right decisions around how to best support our customers. We can't do it without meaningful information out of the incident management system. So categorization just drives what we do within the processes. It helps to continuously improve the environment, but really feeds and helps to protect the overall objectives of these processes by giving us a better picture holistically of what creates a service. So, of course, we've got a lot of other data going into that, like, information coming out of the configuration management system and the CMDB. But when we look at what we're trying to drive from a continuous improvement perspective, incident and problem, and that categorization is incredibly important to the success of what we do. So let's look at what the interface to service catalog management does with a better categorization. First of all, we can get a much better view of the services that we're providing to the business, right, and connect it back to the business process. So we can see that from the service catalog. But then being able to tie that service back to all of the supporting services and incidents and problems across this integrated view of what creates a service really provides visibility into where the faults are, where the errors are as it relates to meeting the needs of the business at the business process level. So the combination of having the connection between the business process and the business service view and internally the configuration items and the incidents and problems really, from a focusing in on which of the services are most important and which ones have the highest service levels that we have to achieve, that integrated view is hugely important to us to understand the impact and the value back to the business. So the connection with catalog really does help us to focus where we need to support the business. If a particular business process, for example, is going to be particularly meaningful over the next 6 months because of some business initiative, we may want to go in and look at, okay, what are the recurring incidents and problems, things that we can do now that will make a difference, that will make that service even more reliable over the next 6 months as the business launches this initiative. So we can really truly focus, where it's going to make a difference to the business. From a career development perspective, we go through and we think about, ask the customers, what level of service that they're being provided. And a lot of times we'll hear that, that person that answered the phone just didn't really understand. I know that some people that answer the phone are really good, and when I get them, my issues resolve very quickly. But if I get someone else, I just know that it's going to take longer, right? Our customers begin to see the visibility and the gaps in our analysts' knowledge. So as a manager of those resources, where do you begin, given the complexity of our infrastructure, to even understand where to enhance an individual's knowledge, let alone the entire team? So when we can look at the products and services that we provide in a very logical format, look at the volume and the type of incidents that are occurring, we can then use that information to drive going out and do a skills assessment of what our individuals, what their talents are, and then bridge the gap between what we need and what they have. And we'll have a much better picture of how to drive not only the capture of knowledge, but where we need to train our resources to make them more successful in supporting the breadth and depth of services that we provide. Now, you know, we do this focused training a lot. You know, we've got a major initiative going on, so we'll do some refresh training about a particular product or service. But this gives us the granularity of looking at the skill sets that are needed and doing this gap analysis so that we can come up with long-term career development plans that help to span the different pockets of knowledge that people need. And then when you have somebody at the service desk that has that breadth and depth of understanding of not just the customer, but all the products and services that we provide, you can imagine how important of an asset they are to some of those other support groups where that knowledge can be used as part of, you know, really getting into a domain expert area and provide even greater value to the organization. So very important for career development for us. We can use this information to drive, you know, more successful resources within the processes that we are working with. And when we talk about escalation paths, this is what we mean. If we take our categories like business applications, and we have the type of application, maybe it's an application called Acquire or Lotus Notes. If we understand our customer base, the priority, and the support partner, the level of support that we provide, we can very quickly, based upon the category type item structure, be able to get the issue to the person that can resolve it as quickly as possible. And we know that getting it to the right place is part of the efficiency and effectiveness of this process. So this gives us the ability to have a really very clear understanding based upon the category type and item of services that we provide. What should the service desk do? And if they can't solve it, what do they do and how do they get it out to the appropriate escalation partner? So again, that's driven by that category type item structure within the categorization scheme. Now here's an example of a Pareto analysis, something that we would do as part of problem management. Our goal with this particular report is to identify what area of our categories has the most frequently occurring issues, you know, that are impacting our customers. And the idea is to add, you know, each total together until we get to 80%, which is what the dashed line is across from here. Now, if I am going to be focused on continuous improvement, it would make more sense for me to focus in on business apps, hardware, software, than it would be to begin looking at connectivity or information, right? Because it has very little impact to the environment, and the amount of time and effort that I spend improving connectivity or information isn't really going to have an impact on the business. So when we do something like this within problem management, we're really trying to drive where we improve products and services so that they'll make the greatest impact. And notice again, the Pareto analysis is driven by those high-level category structures that we have. So if we're not capturing incidents the same way every time, then it's likely that out of the 336 incidents that were captured within business applications, maybe they're kind of trickled down through, and maybe some of them are in connectivity and some of them are in email. You know, then we lose visibility into really where the issues are occurring. So that, you know, the categorization drives the consistency of that data so we get a realistic picture and are focused on those things that will provide the greatest value. So let's look at the basics of how to put together a categorization scheme. At the core, the incidents are broken down into buckets, right? And each one of these buckets hold a set of incidents with a common set of characteristics. So our goal is to identify what those high-level buckets are going to be, and that's where we begin to categorize our incidents into that high-level category structure. So within each of the bucket, then, there are also subsets of similar incidents within that bucket. So if we look into that bucket, we can say, oh, well, we've got some of these are common and some of these over here are common. And what we try to do, again, is to break what's in the bucket down into subsets or other buckets within that bucket. And this would then represent the type of incidents that are occurring in the environment. So the first thing that we have to do is to identify the buckets. If you are fortunate enough to have some historical data, you can pull about 3 months of the most recent activity out of your current incident management system, and then begin to define what are our top high-level buckets. And generally, you want to keep this within about 10. If you go too much higher than 10, you can again see how very quickly we multiply the possibilities as we get in through the hierarchical menus. So just start with 10 high-level buckets. And in a working meeting with a cross-functional group, go through those tickets and identify what the names of these buckets should be and which tickets should go into what buckets. And if you don't have any that fit, you have to look at maybe revising that structure, maybe adding one, or combining two that only have a little bit in it. But it's a very good visibility into how to create an adequate number at the very highest level, because that's what's going to drive everything from that point, your data analysis from that point down. As you're establishing this new structure, you can use an other category for those things that maybe you didn't get enough information for in order to understand how to effectively categorize them. But the goal is not to keep the other there, but to use it to collect information and then get information out of there and see if it fits into the structure over the next couple months. And maybe you may need to add a bucket here or combine a couple buckets based upon what's coming out of the other category. Stabilize with this structure, use it for a few months, and then capture data within each one of those buckets. Our goal as an outcome of this is to have 10 to 15 high-level categories for the types of incidents that are occurring in our environment. Now, step 2 is to verify that bucket. So after the 3 months, we bring our project team back together and we look at what we were putting into those high-level categories and say, hey, did this work? What was in the other? Let's dump it out. Let's see if we may need to modify the structure at all. And where should we put these other tickets? And then at the end of the verification, we want to confirm that we have 10 to 12 categories that we as an organization can agree upon to move forward. So we want to put that under change control and no longer make changes to that high-level categorization. Then we start it again. We've got these buckets now with information in them, and now we need to determine what's the next level in our hierarchical menu. So once you have a bucket filled, the next thing you do is you dump it out, and you look at within that bucket what are the common types of incidents that occur within that bucket. You create collections of those common types, again, divided into these common types with the goal of developing 10 to 15 types per category. And it's the same thing. We'll use these for a little while, gather data, verify that it's working, and once you have those, high-level 10 to 15 types per category, then you can go ahead again and dump each one of those buckets out and go ahead and identify 10 to 15 items per type. It's very important that you do this as a cross-functional group because part of it is educating and getting people to think in similar ways. I don't know if you have ever experienced this, but I have when I've gone in to find something on SharePoint. I often find that it logically matches someone's brain structure, but it doesn't necessarily match my own. And I have a very difficult time replicating the path to find a particular document that I might need to use and update. So it becomes so tedious that it's just enough of a hurdle that I just resist using it. So when we think about this, we're trying to get a consensus across a very broad range of stakeholders and be able to come up with something that's going to work for the reporting that's needed by the service desk as much as it is by availability or the data warehousing or the server group. So having this cross-functional group work together to identify the category type item structure, you'll be more likely to live with it for a longer period of time and more people will be happy than if you sit down and do it yourself and go through these and come up with your own logical structure. The next thing is to then pilot it. You have these 10 high-level categories, 10 types, and then 10 items per type, and you want to give this a try in the environment. So you pilot it. Again, you can use these other structures to begin capturing things that you're not sure where they're going to fit, or maybe it's for new stuff. And then, ultimately our goal is to come up with a structure that works for our organization that we can sustain and use over a period of time. We can improve these buckets from time to time. You have to be very careful because once you change the categorization structure, you have the possibility of cutting off the historical perspective that is so valuable to many of the design processes and to the proactive side of problem management. It's not just the past 2 weeks that are important. It can be sometimes 3 months or 6 months, or even maybe we're looking at trends that happen on an annual cycle. So once we change those categories, we often lose that historical data, of an incident comparing to an incident, from January to February. So our goal is just to improve as we are kind of evolving to meet the changing needs of the business. So as new products and services come on board, we will want to add that to the structure where it makes the most sense. As things are retired, we may want to archive the incident and problem data and remove that out of our categorization structure. So it does need to be modified over a period of time, but we have to be very careful in the way that we do this so that we don't impact that historical record. The last step is to put this whole thing under change control. No changes should occur once we've agreed on a structure unless it's gone through a formal review through the change management process where we're looking at the risk, we're understanding the impact to the data that we're capturing within the environment, and then we can make good decisions on where new categorization needs to be added to match new requirements or when services retire, archiving that data and removing it from the structure. So we need to get the organization to agree that all changes to categorization have to go through that peer review as part of change management. So some critical success factors. One thing that doesn't come out of all of this discussion is the use of closure categorizations. Something that comes in walking like a duck may not leave walking like a duck, right? It may be something completely different. So our goal is to capture the symptoms as it existed when the customer called us in, but if it turns out to be something very different as we go through the resolution process, we want to capture what we identified within IT as being the actual categorization when it's closed. This really, kind of minimizes the use of other because a lot of times people will begin to use other because it just becomes very different than something that we've seen before. But we absolutely need to be able to use some sort of a closure categorization that helps us with reporting around, what from an IT perspective, what was going on. The use of other, by the way, we don't want to grow dependent upon this. We can overuse it where you'll go in and you'll look at an other category and it'll have 800 tickets in it. Clearly if it's got 800 in there, we have data that we need to be able to mine, and it's going to be a very manual process to get trends out of something like that. So we want to minimize the use after we've stabilized on our structure. Don't forget to train your staff on how to use this categorization structure. It's just like when you go to the web and search for knowledge. Good search terms pull up excellent results immediately. Sometimes if your search terms are a little vague, you're not going to be able to find information as clearly as you possibly could. So don't assume that just because people are in IT that they get categorization. Everybody's brains work differently. So you want to make certain that we're all on the same page of how this categorization structure works. And think about what you want to measure before you create the structure. if I know that I need to be able to report on how services are meeting business expectations, then at some place I'm going to need to be able to capture information based on services. If I need to know how it's going to be supporting our customers, I need to be able to track that to a customer. So let the needs of what we need to report to improve and align with the business drive what we're going to capture within this categorization. Other critical success factors, please don't forget to maintain a very strong customer or business focus. All too often, we let IT's perspective drive the categorization, and then we're left to fill in the gaps between how the information we gathered for IT lends itself back to that business view or that customer view. It's also important to understand the affected service. I know that a lot of the ticketing systems, from a relationship perspective, you can get to the service through the relationships that are created within the configuration management system. But sometimes the reporting is going to be much more effective if we're tracking as part of category type item as one of our hierarchical structures an actual service. The power of being able to pull all of the incidents, problems, and changes related to that service from a reporting perspective, it just gives us really great visibility into that. And then the data should help to drive improvements that are meaningful to the business, not vice versa. I mean, I think about one of the most challenging things that I had as an operational manager with the data was trying to figure out what to do to improve. It wasn't that I lacked the data. It was making it a meaningful improvement to the business. So we have the ability to keep that focus from a customer or business perspective and let that drive where we make our improvements. So some pitfalls. Please avoid the constant recategorization. Again, I talked about it, killing the historical perspective of the services. But, we really need to be able to identify patterns, and the patterns come out of the consistency of what we want within the system. Don't add a structure to gain visibility or importance to products and services. Avoid the unbalanced categorization where you have fewer than 5% in a categorization or more than 30%. And don't change the categorization of a ticket. Instead, use that closure categorization. Other pitfalls, try to use just 10. If you can standardize on 10, that would be great. That will help to avoid redundancy within that categorization. So I'm going to quickly take a look at our questions. It says, how can you scale this approach with a new tool implementation at a larger company? Larger than 1 million incidents per year. Clearly, coming up with 10 high-level categorization schemes is a little off the scale of managing 1 million incidents per year. But you do have to think about scalability. I mean, libraries can hold a tremendous amount of books, and yet the Dewey Decimal System still works. So I wouldn't say that you'd have to scale it up too much, but you have to use your best judgment on what's an appropriate level of detail given that volume. Next question is, I would assume that both incident and problem should use the same categorization scheme, but should the choices for each category be the same? Yeah, they should use the same categorization. I'm not sure what you mean by the choices for category. Oh, I think I know what you mean. So maybe if it's coming in from an incident perspective, it may be a different category than what we might put into problem management. Yeah, we still would want to be able to track that, and you can track that from the relationship information from a service perspective. The last one here, how does this classification relate to CI categorization, and should there be a relationship? Absolutely.